Hello, smart community friends, and hello to our listeners in Arbud in Jordan. You are amongst this month's top cities for episode download, so welcome. I'm back with another bonus episode of the Smart Community Podcast, sharing various guests' answers to the question, where to next for smart cities and communities? And this time I'm sharing with you the answers from these guests. Sandra Phillips from episode 302, Martin Darcy from episode 303, Zubin Pratap from episode 304, and finally Elisabeth L'Orange from episode 305. Some themes that come through in the guest answers are around collaboration and more integrated thinking to becoming more resilient and getting maximum value out of data and more accessibility to data. Smart communities are about thinking differently to get the most out of everything we have, including data and resources. It's so important to draw the maximum value out of data to have the greatest impacts on our communities and organizations. As Elisabeth L'Orange says, having training data sets that are accessible for everyone and democratising data, I think that is where we should all begin. So it's easier for smart communities and cities and startups to actually build something to have an impact. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the smart community, smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Where to next for smart cities and communities?
Where to next? This is like, I wish I could just say, let's just use this one thing and then we'll fix it all. We just keep plugging away at it, all of us in our different fields. Maybe the one thing, where to next, is like increase this collaboration piece, this like industry and public sector and regulators. I know there's always this thought that there's two different things, but actually, if you want to do it well, it has to work well together. So I think that, as I say, this is not something new or like completely different, but I think having that next, so we really can build these tailored ecosystems, context-based, as you said, that would be, let's just put it that way, that would be my mobility wish for smart communities.
I think for local government, the future trends is really just going to be, when I say trend, it's trying to draw the maximum value they can out of data. I still think the trends are just going to go on the data side of things. I think government's catching up with the rate of change and just working out how data can help them and then getting the necessary resources in place. I think that's a trend that's already now, right? But I think that's going to continue. It won't change quite some time. I think it's just going to be catch up, and then work out how data can really help us.
Yeah. I mean, my next question is where to next for smart cities and communities, right? And I think, like you've just said, from a local government perspective, it's that focusing in on that data, how to get the best value out of that data. Anything else in that space?
Well, I think, everything from, again, if I focus on local government, it's the things that are already happening, smart water metering, things that improve services but reduce costs, rather than having a couple of dudes walking around, a high vis, checking out your meter. Can that money be put into something else? Water flow, flood, look, talk about resilience. So part of this work we had done, we had bushfires go through. We were one of the, in 2019, the bushfire impacted areas that really hurt our LGA. We had a little bit of a look at how, through that big data exercise I talked about earlier, about how traffic stopped going through our towns during those times, how traffic movement and people movement changed during that period. So things like resilience planning, I think, is going to be a massive step. And I know the guys at Place Intelligence were doing a fair bit of work in that space and with some governments overseas as well. So that's, I think, absolutely, with the continuing onset of disasters in this country, how smart cities and data, you can help that. And we heard a lot now from the Bureau of Meteorology how they couldn't even see some of these things happening. They were just as surprised with the rapid event that happened. So you have a big organisation like that that puts its whole reputation and its operational, everything it does on that type of data. How are they, so what solutions are they looking for in that sort of space around data to help them better do their jobs? And then how does that filter down then to local government, state government, local governments to better plan for resilience planning? And if you do that, then one, you don't have such a big event, but also the recovery is quicker. And so there's everything from planning then to assessment to recovery and how data can help us do that. Now, that's big. That is massive. But, it's costing local governments so much in fixing things that happen that it's almost inevitable that I think, like I said, because it's continuing all these events, that's just going to be a natural course of events. I think that smart cities will go.
Yeah, I agree. I think resilience is huge, and it obviously means so many different things. But yeah, it has to be part of the smart city conversation. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen change in the last few years is that we are actually thinking more integrated across, thinking it's not just smart over here, like we were saying earlier. It's actually how do we solve things like climate change? How do we solve things like, input into our resilience, being more resilient, those type of things. How do we provide better services, all integrated in? So, yeah.
So where to next for smart communities?
I don't know. So you tell me. You're the ones, on the vanguard. You tell me.
So much. I mean, I think bringing in what we've been talking about and people realizing that it's not this thing that's separate from them, that it's about growing, changing as an individual, as a person, shifting that mindset that things are possible. Because, talking to local councils or state government, when an agenda gets driven, when there's focus on, this smart community approach, embedding this approach, it doesn't come from the organization or the building, right? It comes from people within, and it comes from leadership, and then it trickles down into how we empower people then to come up with new ideas and actually input into it. So I think if we are able to, I guess, not separate those things out, that it's, like you said, the individuals within the community, then I think we'll actually see some of this stuff shift and change. The technology is available, the data's there. We have the ability to develop up these skill sets that we need to be able to make better decisions. Now it's really, the time for people to be empowered to be able to do that. And, and not in like everyone has to be high-fiving and drinking chai tea or whatever, which is, not a bad life, doing yoga. That's what I do. But I think people may, they go, oh, well, no, I mean, in the corporate world or whatever, like when we talk about this personal growth stuff, people go, oh, that's a bit too much or a bit woo-woo or a bit whatever. But I think if we start to pick the things we want, the ingredients that we need, and then just, that possible brain is what I think about is like, yeah, this is possible. What steps do we want to take? Because if we're not happy or not happy, but if things aren't working the way we want them to within ourselves or in our communities, we have to take action to be able to shift and change those. They won't just help themselves necessarily if we're not involved. Or they might, but it might not be the way we want it to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's hard to, I've got nothing more to add to that because that was really well put.
So where to next for smart cities and communities?
Yeah, good question. I think having, like I said at the beginning, having training data sets that are accessible for everyone and sort of democratizing the whole data. I think that's where we should all begin. So it's also easier for like smart cities and communities, for little startups to actually build something, to have an impact, to build ride sharing models and everything. But you need the data for it. And if you don't have access to it, you have no chance. So I think democratizing data for smart cities and communities is definitely, in my opinion, one of the key elements. What do you think?
There's so many things. And I guess I talked to so many different people about all different areas. So I think now that we're not quite out yet, but we're, coming up to breathe, we're going to start looking around and working out what is it that we want, what do we want the next century, or even maybe not century, maybe next decade to actually look like. And I think data is one of those, and AI, what do we actually want that to do for us? What is the technology doing now? how can we use our resources much more efficiently. I was having a conversation this morning about ag tech, like you mentioned, and he said something like on the farm, you don't just do tech for tech's sake, it needs to work for you and use it as a tool. And I think cities and communities will be starting to, I guess, say the same thing. It won't just be, we've always done it like this, so let's just keep going. But what can tech and data do to help us? But then also choosing which applications will work best for that community as well. The other thing is, I think there's going to be more and more, I guess, exposure of, like you said, what is feeding that data source, I guess regulating that to a certain degree, the quality, increasing that for the people. And I think we'll have more and more conversations about that. And it'll be a bit more like open in the mainstream on what's happening and what's not happening, and what we want to happen as well. So it will be interesting to see in the next few years.
What's the regulatory situation in Australia at the moment for AI data? Is it similar to the EU, or is it?
Not quite. I think it'd be more similar to the US. I mean, there definitely is some, but it falls behind. Like the technology just outpaces the regulation, to be honest. And yeah, I guess the privacy aspect is one thing, but then I think the actual, like I said, regulating data sets and things, it wasn't apparent to me that there was, lots happening in that space when I was doing my master's. And I think we'll see more and more of that. And I assume Australia will take, we'll take what Europe's doing, we'll take what the US is doing, and then we'll decide to make our own thing up. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, but that's a classic development, right? Usually the regulator is too slow, and technology always, I mean, that's the nature of technology, It's meant to outpace everybody.
Yes.
Are you looking for an engaging speaker, MC, or facilitator for your next big event? Then we've got you covered. Zoe is a go-to speaker, MC, and conversation facilitator with a difference. She's a master at simplifying the complex and making connections you might never see. Book Zoe for your next event. Email hello@mysmart.community or head over to her speaker page, www.mysmart.community/speaking.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes are available on our website, mysmart.community/podcast. If you have any questions for us or any of our guests, you can email hello@mysmart.community. You can also find us on the socials. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter @SmartComHQ. That's com with 2 M's. If you are enjoying the podcast, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we would love for you to leave us a rating and review at wherever you listen. This really helps us reach more ears and eyes, so thank you for your support. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.